In the winter of 546 before Common Era, the wealthiest king in the ancient world stood at the edge of a river, staring across at an army that would decide his fate. His name was Croesus, and he ruled Lydia, a kingdom so rich that even today we use the phrase rich as Croesus to describe extravagant wealth. But wealth couldn't answer the question burning in his mind. Should he cross this river and attack the Persian Empire, or should he turn back? So he did what any ancient king would do when facing an impossible decision. He consulted the gods. The oracle at Delphi was the most trusted voice in the ancient world. Kings, generals, and common people traveled hundreds of miles to hear the prophecies spoken by the Pythia, a priestess who sat above a crack in the earth, breathing vapors that were believed to carry the voice of Apollo himself. For a generous donation of gold, she would answer any question about the future. Croesus sent messengers with a fortune in tribute. His question was simple. If I cross the Halys River and attack Persia, what will happen? The oracle's response came back clear and confident. If Croesus crosses the river, a great empire will fall. The king smiled. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. A great empire would fall. Persia would crumble. His victory was guaranteed by the gods themselves. He gathered his army, crossed the river, and marched confidently into battle. Within months, his kingdom was destroyed. His capital burned, his legendary wealth seized. Croesus himself was taken prisoner by Cyrus the Great of Persia. The great empire that fell wasn't Persia, it was his own. The oracle had been right. But Croesus had heard what he wanted to hear, not what was actually said. This story has been told for 2,500 years as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition and misinterpreting divine will. But it's more than that. It's a window into something deeper and more troubling about human nature. Our need to know the future doesn't just comfort us, it controls us. And sometimes it destroys us. Because Croesus isn't alone. Throughout history, civilizations have risen and fallen not because prophecy revealed the future, but because belief in prophecy created it. The ancient Greeks understood this paradox better than anyone. They told stories about it constantly. The most famous is the tale of Oedipus. Before his birth, an oracle warned his parents that their son would kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, they abandoned the infant on a mountainside to die. But a shepherd found him and raised him in another city. Years later, Oedipus consulted an oracle himself and heard the same prophecy. Desperate to avoid this fate, he fled the only parents he'd ever known. On the road, he got into an argument with a stranger and killed him. That stranger was his biological father. He arrived at Thebes, solved the riddle of the Sphinx, and was rewarded with the hand of the recently widowed queen, his mother. Every action he took to avoid the prophecy brought him closer to fulfilling it. The Greeks had a word for this. They called it fate. But modern psychology has a different term: self-fulfilling prophecy. In 1948, a sociologist named Robert Merton was studying how beliefs shape behavior. He noticed something strange. When people believed something would happen, they unconsciously acted in ways that made it happen. A bank run is a perfect example. If enough people believe a bank will fail, they rush to withdraw their money. The bank, unable to meet the sudden demand, actually does fail. The belief creates the reality. But this phenomenon goes far beyond economics. It shapes wars, religions, and the rise and fall of civilizations. In 1096, Pope Urban II stood before a crowd in France and proclaimed that God wanted Christians to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. He promised that anyone who died in this holy war would have all their sins forgiven and enter paradise immediately. Thousands of peasants, knights, and nobles took up the cross. They believed they were fulfilling biblical prophecy, that the end times were near, and that their actions were part of God's divine plan. What they created was 200 years of bloodshed we now call the Crusades. Cities burned, populations were massacred. But here's what most people don't realize. Many of the prophecies the Crusaders believed in didn't exist until after the First Crusade began. Monks and priests, seeing the enthusiasm of the warriors, wrote new interpretations of Scripture to support the war. The prophecy didn't predict the Crusades. The Crusades created the prophecy that justified them. The pattern repeats across cultures. In the early 16th century, the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma received reports of strange omens, comets in the sky, a temple burning with invisible fire, a bird with a mirror on its head that showed warriors approaching from the east. Aztec priests interpreted these signs as the return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who had promised to return from across the sea. In 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived on the eastern shore of Mexico with a few hundred men. Moctezuma, believing this might be the prophesied return, hesitated to attack. He sent gifts. He invited Cortés to his capital. He tried to determine if this was truly a god made flesh. That hesitation gave the Spanish time to form alliances with enemy tribes, learn the layout of the city, and understand Aztec military tactics. By the time Moctezuma realized his mistake, it was too late. The Aztec Empire fell not because prophecy revealed its doom, but because belief in prophecy paralyzed its leader at the crucial moment. But perhaps no civilization bet more heavily on prophecy than ancient Rome. By the 1st century before Common Era, Rome had accumulated a collection of texts called the Sibylline books. These were prophecies supposedly written by the Cumaean Sibyl, an ancient oracle. The books were kept in the Temple of Jupiter and consulted only in times of crisis. They guided military campaigns, religious reforms, and political decisions. In 44 before Common Era, Julius Caesar was warned by a soothsayer to beware the Ides of March. He ignored the warning and was assassinated on that exact date. But here's the twist that history often overlooks. The conspiracy to kill Caesar had been forming for months. Multiple senators were involved. The plot was widespread. And one of the senators, Decimus Brutus, was a close friend of Caesar who had access to his schedule and his trust. Did the soothsayer genuinely predict the future? Or did the soothsayer hear rumors of the conspiracy and deliver a warning that sounded prophetic? And if Caesar had taken the warning seriously and avoided the Senate that day, would the conspirators have simply waited for another opportunity? The prophecy didn't create the assassination. The political tensions did. But the prophecy became the story we remember. This is the strange power of prophecy. It doesn't have to be real to be influential. It just has to be believed. In the 20th century, this phenomenon reached new and dangerous heights. In Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi leadership were obsessed with prophecy and mysticism. They believed in the destiny of the Aryan race. They consulted astrologers. They searched for religious relics they believed would grant them power. They interpreted historical events as signs that they were meant to reshape the world. This belief in destiny made them more dangerous. It justified atrocities as necessary steps in a grand historical plan. It convinced millions of Germans that they were part of something larger than themselves, a prophesied 1,000-year Reich. The prophecy of racial supremacy didn't predict the Holocaust. It caused it. But even when prophecies aren't evil, they can be destructive. In the 1970s and 1980s, a wave of Christian evangelical movements in the United States became obsessed with end-times prophecy. Books like The Late Great Planet Earth sold millions of copies by claiming that biblical signs proved the world would end within a generation. Some believers stopped planning for the future. Why save for retirement if the rapture is coming? Why worry about environmental damage if the earth is about to be destroyed anyway? When the predicted dates passed without incident, the prophecies were recalculated. New dates were set. The pattern continued, but the belief had already shaped behavior. Political decisions about the environment, foreign policy, and social programs were influenced by the conviction that the end was near. The prophecy didn't predict anything, but it changed everything. So why do we keep falling for this? Why do humans, across every culture and every era, seek out prophecies, oracles, and predictions? The answer lies in something psychologists call the illusion of control. The future is terrifying because it's uncertain. We don't know if we'll succeed or fail, live or die, find happiness or suffer. That uncertainty is unbearable. So we seek patterns. We consult experts. We look for signs. We convince ourselves that we can see what's coming. And once we believe we know the future, we act accordingly. We make decisions based not on present circumstances, but on our expectations of what will happen. And those decisions shape reality. King Croesus attacked Persia because he believed he would win. His confidence led to strategic errors. He underestimated his enemy. He overextended his army. The prophecy didn't doom him. His interpretation of it did. Oedipus fled his home because he feared the prophecy. That flight put him on the road where he met his father. The prophecy didn't cause his fate. His attempt to avoid it did. Moctezuma hesitated because he believed Cortez might be a god. That hesitation gave the Spanish the foothold they needed. The prophecy didn't destroy the Aztecs. The belief in it did. This is the terrible paradox at the heart of prophecy. The moment we believe we know the future, we begin to create it. Not because the future was written, but because our beliefs shape our choices, and our choices shape reality. In 1954, a psychologist named Leon Festinger infiltrated a cult that believed aliens would destroy the Earth on a specific date. The leader, a woman who called herself a prophet, claimed she received messages from extraterrestrials warning of floods that would end civilization. The cult members quit their jobs, left their families, and gathered on the appointed night to wait for the flying saucer that would rescue them. The date came. Midnight passed. No aliens, no flood, no rescue. Festinger expected the group to disband in disappointment. Instead, something strange happened. The prophet announced that she had received a new message. Their faith had been so strong that God had spared the earth. The prophecy was fulfilled not by its accuracy, but by its failure, and many of the cult members believed her. They became more committed than before. This is the final trick prophecy plays on us. Even when it's wrong, we find ways to make it right. We reinterpret, we recalculate, we move the goalposts. Because admitting the prophecy was false means admitting we shaped our lives around a lie. Today, prophecy takes new forms. We call them predictions, forecasts, and projections. Economic models predict markets. Climate scientists predict environmental change. Political analysts predict elections. And we listen to these modern oracles the same way ancient kings listened to priestesses at Delphi. Sometimes these predictions are based on solid evidence and careful analysis, but often, the mere act of making a prediction changes the outcome. If economists predict a recession, investors pull back, businesses cut spending, and the recession becomes more likely. If polls predict a candidate will lose, volunteers give up, donations dry up, and the prediction reinforces itself. We haven't escaped the trap of prophecy. We've just dressed it up in statistics and called it science. But there is a difference between ancient prophecy and modern forecasting. The difference is uncertainty. Good modern forecasters don't claim to know the future with certainty. They offer probabilities. They acknowledge what they don't know. They update their models when new evidence appears. The danger comes when we forget that difference. When we treat predictions as certainties. When we stop asking whether the forecast might be wrong and start asking only how to prepare for what we've been told will happen. King Croesus made that mistake. He heard what he wanted to hear and stopped questioning. His certainty destroyed him. But imagine if he had approached the prophecy differently. What if he had asked, "What if this prophecy is wrong? What if the empire that falls is mine? What would I do differently?" That single question might have saved his kingdom. The oracle at Delphi stood for nearly 1,000 years before it finally closed in the 4th century CE. During that time, it shaped the decisions of generals, kings, and entire civilizations. Its prophecies were famous for being ambiguous, open to interpretation, impossible to prove wrong. And that ambiguity was the secret of its power, because prophecy doesn't need to be true. It just needs to be believed. And once believed, it becomes true not because it predicted the future, but because it created it. The ruins of Delphi still stand in Greece today. Tourists walk through the remains of the temple. They stand where the Pythia once sat. They look out over the valley where ancient pilgrims gathered, desperate for answers about what was to come. The oracle is silent now, but the questions remain. Can we ever truly know the future? Should we even try? And what happens when our need for certainty becomes more dangerous than the uncertainty we're trying to escape? King Croesus learned the answer too late. A great empire did fall. It just wasn't the one he expected. The prophecy came true, but only because he believed it.